Donald Trump's much-hyped Alaska summit with Vladimir Putin is set for tomorrow. In the run-up to the talks, the U.S. president has said his meeting with Putin will be a give and take on boundaries and lands. Now, that's a sentiment that's likely to worry authorities over in Ukraine. The Russian president, too, has been praising Washington's role for making a sincere effort to solve the conflict. Take a listen.
I would like to share with you where we currently stand with the U.S. administration, which, as everyone well knows, is making, in my opinion, quite vigorous and sincere efforts to halt hostilities, end the crisis, and reach agreements that serve the interests of all parties involved in this conflict. This is about creating long-term conditions for peace, both between our countries, in Europe, and in the world as a whole. If at the next stage we reach agreements on strategic offensive arms control.
We can now bring in Ian Bond, Deputy Director at the Centre for European Reform and former British Ambassador to Latvia. You've also had previous postings in Russia early on in your career. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Vladimir Putin seems to be praising Washington in the run-up to these talks in Alaska. Is he being sincere, or is this some part of some broader strategy here?
I think Putin is very rarely sincere. And he knows that the best way to get Donald Trump to do what he wants is to flatter him, so he's flattering him. Putin, after all, had no doubt excellent training from the KGB on how you manipulate a subject. And I think that's precisely what he's setting up for tomorrow.
Trump says he thinks Putin wants to make a deal, but if you're Vladimir Putin, why would you want to stop now, considering Moscow is the one making gains on the battlefield and has managed to do so despite all the sanctions thrown at it?
I think you're asking exactly the right question. And it's a question that Donald Trump should be asking himself as well. In reality, I don't think that Putin has shown any real sign of being ready to compromise. And when Trump is talking about, swapping territory back and forth, I think he is negotiating with himself, not with Vladimir Putin.
In the past few weeks, Donald Trump has oscillated between saying he's the one who knows how to handle Vladimir Putin and also threatening secondary sanctions on Moscow. But these two men will be meeting alone. Donald Trump has been relying on Steve Witkoff, a man who has zero diplomatic experience. And as you said, he's going to be up against somebody who's a KGB man.
Yes, I think, the rest of us should view with profound worry the idea that it will just be Trump, Putin and their interpreters, because there is no knowing what may come out of Trump's mouth, and there is no knowing how it will be reported afterwards. What we saw the last time a tete-a-tete meeting between the two men happened was that Trump confiscated his interpreter's notes so that there could be no accurate record afterwards of what had been discussed or agreed. So I think there's good reason to be quite concerned about the fact that the two are meeting in that format.
What is the significance for Moscow that these talks are being held in Alaska? And why would the United States either suggest or agree to this location?
Both of those are excellent questions. I think there has been some Russian trolling of Trump suggesting that Putin will be taking a domestic flight to Alaska. There are, of course, nationalists in Russia who say that Russia should claim Alaska back from the Americans. So it is a very surprising venue. And I think it really says something about the lack of understanding of Russia within the Trump administration, where there is really no senior Russia expert anywhere in the White House, the National Security Council, or the senior parts of the State Department, who is able to say, maybe this is not the best optics that we could obtain, and maybe meeting on neutral ground or not meeting at all would be a better option.
Donald Trump seems to suggest that all options are on the table. But as you know, and I know, he's looking for a deal and he's looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. Could Putin use this as leverage to get what he wants, i.e., things like recognition of the territory he's already seized?
Well, I'm sure that that's exactly what Putin will be trying to do. I think the problem for him is that whatever Trump says, it doesn't change the facts on the ground. I think also that even Trump, with the power that he has over his party, would struggle to get the Senate or others to lift some of the sanctions against Russia, which is clearly something that Russia wants, or to refrain from criticizing any decision to recognize the annexation of Crimea or other Ukrainian territories by Russia. So I think there are limits to what Trump himself can deliver to be helpful to Putin.
And what about Russia's red lines? Things like Ukraine being neutral, not joining NATO. I mean, we know that from Donald Trump's statements in the past, even J.D. Vance's statements, and even Pete Hegseth's statements, that this was unrealistic, even though we've had certain NATO member states that continue to give Ukraine some hope. Would Donald Trump be inclined to listen to that red line from the Russians and take that off the table at least?
Well, I think he's already taken that off the table. I mean, that was a preemptive concession by Trump and by members of his administration months and months ago. There will have to be other ways of providing Ukraine with security guarantees. But I think, for the foreseeable future, NATO membership, unfortunately, is off the table. Putin's basic objective has not changed, and his objective is to remove Ukraine from the map as a sovereign, independent state. And, that is something which he and other Russian spokesmen have repeated endlessly over the last several years. When they talk about removing the root causes of the conflict, what they are basically saying is that the best that Ukraine should be able to hope for is to be a Russian vassal state along the lines of Belarus. Well, that's clearly something that neither Ukraine nor European countries can accept. So, that to some extent means that whatever Trump may agree with Putin, it isn't going to be implementable.
How does Russia view the fact that Europe will not be sitting at this table in Alaska tomorrow, nor Ukraine? This despite the Europeans for months who've been trying to jostle to get a seat at the table and have been rebuffed at every turn by the Americans. Yes, there was that virtual summit yesterday, but it's not the same as having a seat at the table.
No, I mean, it makes it much easier for the Russians in the discussion tomorrow because there isn't going to be anybody there who will put Putin straight when he produces his usual cocktail of lies about the history of Russia and Ukraine. And I saw that apparently one of the stories coming out of Moscow is that he will bring some kind of historical dossier with him to brief Trump. Well, we saw that last year when he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and he gave him a long history lecture. I can't see Trump actually tolerating such a long lecture, but I'm sure that Putin will be trying to persuade Trump that Ukraine has always been part of Russia, and it's a very unnatural situation that now it is an independent country. And it's a great pity that there won't be any Europeans, or still less Zelensky, there at the table to say, well, the hell with that. Ukraine is an independent country.
What are you expecting to come out of this meeting in Alaska?
I mean, I think the best I hope for is that Trump overreaches himself so much that Putin overreaches himself so much that even Trump realizes that he's being taken for a fool. But what I worry slightly is that Putin will manage yet again to persuade Trump, who I think is quite willing to think this anyway, that it's Ukraine that is to blame for the war, not Russia. And Trump will then look for ways to put more pressure on Zelensky rather than, as he should do, putting more pressure on Putin.
Okay, it'll be interesting to watch nonetheless. Ian Bond, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you.